Hey, Jason. Okay, so thanks for your patience with my work week and all that. But let's jump into it. You sent a lot of videos, which is cool. But fair warning, this may get long. I'll try to focus on the one that you sent that's the most recent. Because you said that's like a fresher throw. But I did want to kind of then loop back and double up on some things from some of which are the same and some of which are different. Just point those out. Make sure that we're hitting the important stuff twice, and yeah, just look at the different angles and all that. So let's jump into it. So first of all, like you're throwing very well. You're doing the thing, which no one ever does, because no one ever coaches on it, which is you're throwing from a hyser angle and you're keeping your hyser plane consistent through the whole throw because you're using your left leg as a counterweight. For some reason, nobody ever figures that out. Pretty much nobody's really coached on it well. Seabass talks about it a little bit, but he's very challenging for a lot of people to understand. And Loop Ghost mentions it in 2 or 3 videos in passing, but doesn't pound into your head how important it is. So it's awesome that you're doing that already. I think that's where a lot of your success is coming from. But still lots of stuff we can tune up. So the first thing I'm seeing that I would encourage you to change, or at least look into, is this foot placement. A handful of people, including myself and Brian Earhart, are now pretty firmly coaching that this foot needs to be at a 90. So it needs to be going that way. So your toe placement is going to be the same, but your heel is going to stay, 90 degrees back from that. There's a bunch of reasons for this. The reason I started coaching on it is because I saw every beginner in the world turning their foot even farther than you are. Like, what you're doing is functional. There's nothing super wrong with it, but it keeps your knee stuck backwards at the same angle your toe is at, which ends up screwing up your ability to brace. And it's kind of a big deal. Like, people can still throw pretty well not doing it, and pros can throw well. Like, Eagle will go on a 45 or more and set his heel down, which you're not supposed to do. But none of that matters if you get your knee forward in time. So what you want is this position where your back knee is bent and your front knee is bent in. Like, I'm sure you've seen that photo of the 4 pros all in this knee position on the same T-pad. This is super key because it indicates that your weight shift into the brace is probably correct, and then your weight shift actually on the brace is potentially correct as well. So if you don't have that kind of knock-kneed, pigeon-kneed position, then something's not quite right with your brace, and you're not quite getting that yet. Like, you're very close to it, but getting this foot on a strict 90 will help a lot, I think. So that's the first thing I see is your rear toe. The second thing I see, you can actually see right here in this frame. So your ground contact is here, and your weight is in your front shoulder. So this line is tipping forward. Your body weight is tipping forward, right? That may feel good. It definitely feels powerful, I'm sure, because you're dropping weight in towards your brace. But you don't want to drop weight in towards your brace. You want to keep your weight on your rear foot. This is very much a known thing in baseball hitting form. They know this. They figured it out. A lefty swinging a baseball bat has exactly the same weight shift that we need for a righty throw in disc golf. Let me double check mentally that is correct. Yes, if you're swinging a bat left-handed, you're coiling into your left leg. You're doing a lateral move forward onto your right foot, and you're coiling your spine backwards as well. There's a really cool video that the Teacher Man guy is a baseball dude. I guess he's pretty controversial in the baseball world, but the way he explains that weight shift is like absolutely perfect, and it makes a ton of sense for disc golf too. So I'll get you a link to that. Make a note. Teacher Man 3-axis thing. But I can tell here that you're already shifting. Too much of your body weight is going to dump down onto your brace. Like, I can tell that already. Because you want to keep your weight up over this foot. So I'll play through what your motion looks like. Right, so hopefully you can just see that intuitively. If not, I will prove it to you. But your weight is here. It's like, your weight is 60% of the way forward, and you want to keep it back as long as possible. So you want all of the weight to stay here while this foot reaches out. Do I have any other points to make on that? No. Let's pop over and look at Mr. Gibson. So just look at where his body weight is, right? See how he's back? Well, he's ahead of his ground contact now, but see how his spine is still tilted backwards. He's not leaning forward. He's not dumping weight towards his brace. Still. And even here, from his tailbone to the base of his neck, he's still not dumping weight forward. He's very much trying to keep his weight here. What that allows is it allows for the possibility of a very, very, very strong brace. Basically, no one ever gets this right at an amateur level. Sure, maybe a couple guys do, and it's the people like Peyton who led me to your post that are throwing, 500, 550. So, we can kind of call him on the verge of being a pro, right? He's not really an amateur anymore. He's very much crushing it. But when this foot comes down, if there's already a bunch of weight over here that's going to crush it, it can't possibly brace right. What we want to do as a brace is very smoothly transition the weight from here to here so that this leg doesn't get overpowered and the leg has time to straighten up, stop this hip, and actually push the hip up and backwards more. You're doing the hard part of this. You have a very good, very functional motion. You get a nice scoop in your back leg. That's what allows you to stay on your hyser angle so nicely, and you get a really good push and acceleration from your brace, but you're asking too much of your brace by dumping your shoulder weight onto it too early. So if you just get a little bit tighter on keeping the weight here longer and loading your brace slower, basically, I think you're going to see a lot of benefit in the power of your brace and how much faster it's able to turn your hips around, which will mean more distance, which will result in more consistency at the distances you're getting currently. So that's the biggest thing I see for you, is just changing the way you're thinking about that weight shift and keeping your weight coiled over your back foot longer and not tipping into your brace, if that makes sense. So if any of this is not clear, ask questions. I can go over it again in a different way that makes more sense, or we can hop on a call and we can talk about it in person. Whatever works to get your throw tuned up. Okay, so on to the next point. That's enough of Drew for a minute. So next thing I have is your reach back timing. So this is probably about your peak reach back, but we'll check it. So the way I check reach back timing is, it varies depending on what I'm looking for, but I'm just gonna clicky pausey method, very advanced, until I find what looks like peak reach back. So that looked like it. It looked like your arm flipped up to the angle you're you probably release this on hyser, so that's probably not the angle you're intending to throw on, but that's the angle you're starting your throw on. Totally fine for it to change as long as you're hitting lines and everything. But now that I've found what I'm going to assume is peak reach back, now I'm going to look at your front foot. So I'm going to continue the clicky pausey method, and we're going to see, in relation to this peak reach back, where is your foot in terms of the plan. So your heel wasn't down yet. So that's what I'm looking for, basically. So check it again. So that's definitely peak reach back. You definitely bounced off of that. Nice, pretty good bounce. You're not hanging out at peak for very long. I like that. But the heel wasn't down yet. So you really, 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 really want your extension backwards to peak when your heel hits the ground. Because anything else is a little bit of a pull, right? What should move the disc from your peak reach to going forward at all should be this heel pushing on the leg, stopping the hip, starting the rotation. So your heel should hit, your hips should rotate, your shoulders should start rotating on top of that. But it should feel like it's the heel that pulls the disc forward. So the way that I cue people to think about this is there is no peak reach back. Your goal mentally and your cue mentally should be to reach back until you're like 8-12 feet off the tee pad. Like your arm's just gonna keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And the only thing that ever makes it turn is your heel hitting the ground and your hips starting to turn. Timed with your offhand, which you're working on that, and it's looking a lot better. So hopefully that makes sense. To make my point again, go look at Drew. So this is about good. He's definitely not at peak reach back yet. His toe is just hovering on the turf, about to touch. So we'll clicky pause, looking at the disc until he's at peak. So he's still going backwards. His toe is definitely down. Still going backwards. Heel is closer, but not down. And then the disc came forward, and his heel is very much down. And also, look at how closed his toe is. Like, I don't know where he's throwing exactly. He's probably throwing reasonably hyser on this one. Yeah, because we're seeing the bottom of the flight plate. So he's probably throwing off the left side of the tee pad. Like, he's not throwing straight forward, right? He's throwing like over this way. So it's not like as close as it looks, but still, like he's past 90, I'm pretty sure. I should look up this tournament and see what he threw on that hole. So that's an interesting point. Like, you always want to be aware of what hole pros are throwing on if you're really trying to dial in what's going on with their form, because what shape they're throwing is super relevant. So your reach back is a tiny, tiny, tiny bit early. You will see more consistency and more power if you can get that later. Drew is really good at that, like probably better than most pros, but that's definitely something to strive for, is the latest possible peak reach back you can relative to your heel on your play foot. Okay, so let's look at your offhand. Way better on the offhand. It's still not perfect yet, as I'm sure you're aware. But just look at the motion. I still see a little tiny bit of that stop, that sticky spot that you were trying to fix. So I'm curious what you feel in that spot and if you see the same thing that I do. But I see it kind of go pop, wiggle, and then go back. Pop, wiggle. So there's a couple of things going on here. Sorry to, play everything a million times, but it helps me to see the motion a lot. So you have a lot of up to down. So let's find your wind up position. So that's, I'm calling this a lot of up, where your arm's up by your shoulder, and then you're sending it straight down. Nothing wrong with that, unless there's something wrong with that. But I'm kind of figuring out this part of the motion with you, at least in your case of your odd rotation thing that you were doing. But just looking at Drew and seeing how he's different, right? Not necessarily better, just different. He doesn't have his arm as high as you, which when I throw, I do tend to want to put my arm as high as you, or even higher. Like I like to really float it out there and exaggerate the motion because I feel like it'll clean up as I get my muscle memory set more. But I just wanted to point out what Drew is doing a little bit different. So he's going behind him more, right? He's got a ton of shoulder coil here. Your shoulder coil looks good, but he's going a little bit further. But his arm is going more behind him and less up. And then as it comes around, like he's barely pulled the disc forward at all yet, and his wrist is already tight to his ribs, and his arm comes around more. So I feel like it gets more in front of him, and then immediately starts going back. So you're doing kind of a linear up to down, and he's doing more of a behind to around in front. It's just more circular. Like he doesn't have that stop because he's reaching more across, like towards his belly button even a little bit, and then scooping back. So it's all more one fluid motion, which I think is beneficial in terms of the physics. Like you can just do it down, I'm sure, and get it to work, but in general, I think smoother is probably better. And it looks like his off arm is just timed really well with how his leg scoops too. Yeah, so just another data point to be aware of in your quest to perfect that offhand thing. But I think you still have a little bit of pop, and Drew gets a little more, sends his arm a little more towards his belly button, and then it has a more round transition to the swim move, pushing backwards. Okay, next point. This one I'm not super sure about, but I just wanted to point it out so you can play with it. This has helped me in my throw a decent amount, and when I remember to do it, like it feels more productive. So this is kind of a weird explanation, but it feels, a lot of the throw feels to me like you're kind of using your body to build a tunnel over the disc, kind of like the barrel of a cannon, and then the disc is coming out of that tunnel, but you want your head and your focus to stay in that tunnel shape and not, have your intent go out with the disc. So that may or may not make any sense to you at all, but I can try to explain it. So look at where you're looking, right? You don't ever see the target here. Like it looks like, and this is probably just field work, or you're not super worried about hitting a pin or whatever. So you're focusing on the field, you're not looking where you're throwing, I get it. But that is a dangerous habit to get into, right? Because when you throw without having an intent for where you're throwing to, it can get sketchy because that can get set in your muscle memory, and then you're kind of screwed a little bit. But you're looking down. Like a second ago, you were looking like over here, kind of where you're going to dump your weight for your brace, and now you're looking like this way. And now you're looking behind you, which is probably bad. And then your head comes forward with your torso. So, just so I don't seem like I'm making shit up, Drew does the same thing, but he's eyes on target, eyes on target, eyes on target, comes down to looking at the same spot as you, and his head comes through with his shoulders. Like, if Drew's doing it, I'm going to say it's okay. But what Drew's doing that's different from you is he has his eyes for sure on target. He's playing a tournament for a lot of money on the line, so, and you may have just been doing a fieldwork shot. So that could explain that difference, but I just want to point it out because not looking at your target is a dangerous pastime. So what I would suggest as a cue to help you get your weight shift more consistent is, instead of doing what you're doing and looking here and then here and then here and then here, do more of what Drew's doing and look at your target until your shoulder pushes your chin back, and then you'll end up looking wherever you're looking depending on how far you're turning, either here or here. But once you get to this spot, kind of right in front of where you're throwing, just keep your eyes there. So you'll be staring at this spot, and so right here where he's looking, boom, at the ground. I want you to kind of keep your head in that position. So his head's going to drift forward with his shoulders. I want you to not do that. So when you get to here, your head's going to come forward at some point, but like people say that your rear shoulder should push your head up to where you find your disc. But try it this way and see if it changes anything for you. What I feel like it does for me is it helps me keep my body centered on the spot I'm looking at. So I think that may be helpful, because when you're on your X step and you're tilting forward into that front shoulder, that's the opposite of centered, right? So having this mentality, feeling that feeling in the brace and the hit, can kind of give you a feel for it, and then maybe you could apply that feeling earlier. So maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't, maybe it's a stupid idea, I don't know. But I would encourage you to play with that at your own leisure if it sounds useful to you. But jury's still out on if that one's actually useful or not. Okay, so this clip, your front foot placement is, well, I don't know. It looks pretty good, but watch your front toe as it comes past center. So there's right there, from like here to here. Try to watch it in that time. Can I slow you down anymore? I can. Sweet. So there, your toe is pretty closed. And so it doesn't look like it opens that much in slow-mo. Boop. There's a little bit, though. So this one's okay. I wouldn't really call you on that one. But in the other clips, it is not this clean. So this is the stuff I was talking about, where it's different from the one video to the next one. Yeah, so that's a question mark. If your front foot is like this all the time, I think I'm okay with it. You could try getting it a little more close, like, so I think 90 is like right here. Well, no, let's see. You filmed this from not 90, right? Because 90 off of your T-pad is there, I think. So if you want to actually like check this out for sure and not guess at all, film another good shot like this and make sure that you are filming from exactly 90 degrees off of your T-pad. So what Peyton did for me that was actually, I think, a really good idea is set down like a towel or something, either where the front of the T-pad would be, or I think he had one like here for some reason, but something to indicate exactly where 90 degrees perpendicular to your line of throw, not necessarily the T-pad, but to where you're throwing, because that lets me be sure about where this toe angle is. But if it's not 90 degrees or further back than 90 degrees from your line of throw, then I would really question that, because it being open at all makes it really hard for your front hip to do what it needs to do. And if you're not keen to all of that, we can talk about that for as long as you want, but I won't bore you to death with it in case you're already on team toe closed. So let's look at another couple of videos. I think the first 3 had some interesting stuff in them. Well, first let's get the compliments out of the way. Couple of really cool things happening on this one, and all of your back shots really. So, boop. Oh, I missed it. Just trying to find your peak reach back. Close enough. So this kind of makes me think that maybe this arm is too high because I can't see your shoulder, which feels weird to me. So this is about where your shoulders are. It's about the hyser angle you're trying to throw on. And then after your follow through, you are just a darn bout on the same angle. That is excellent. Nice work. The reason you are able to do that is because of this left foot being a counterweight on exactly 90-degree angle from your shoulders. Nicely done. So that's the thing I was talking about that like almost nobody ever does, right? And pretty darn sure nobody coaches on it. So that rightward motion of your rear foot is the key. It doesn't just keep going forward, it actually goes right a little bit. That is money. So I do think with the amount of, so that throw is pretty good. You were like perfectly balanced on that one. On some of the other ones, you take a decent step forward. It's not offensive at all. You are not going full Conrad or anything. But you do on a couple of them have a decent amount of momentum. Like that one, you know, that's a decent step forward. It's not bad, but anytime there's momentum in your body, especially in your trailing leg, after your brace, if you have to step over your brace, that means there has to be momentum in your body that did not efficiently get transferred into disc. Because if your body's moving after the brace, after the disc is gone, you couldn't possibly have sent that energy into the disc. Sorry, my dog is whining because he wants more food. Don't you, bud? That's okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Ask questions if it doesn't. But the key to getting rid of that extra momentum and getting it into the disc is doing more of what you're already doing and getting that rear leg to be a counterweight. So there's a couple ways you can do it, or a couple variables you can play with. So I'm just gonna mark your foot placement just so we can see where you're at. So like that's pretty darn good, right? So what we're looking for is this leg to go that way and end up here, basically. And if you want more of that, there's a couple things you can do. You can just make these rails wider, either by moving the X step over here, or usually simpler moving the brace a little bit more offset. You can also just be more intentional about sending the weight of this leg forward. But the most important, we are approaching too many lines mode. So you've got rails there basically. The other way to think about it is, to me, visually it looks like your weight is in your front right hip, and you want to imagine your front right hip being on a third rail that's not either one of these, right? When beginners put this weight on top of their brace foot, they spin out like heck over the left side of their brace, and that's not what you're doing. You're getting a nice rightward motion of the rear leg first. More of that motion and more of the weight staying in the leg and going down and getting like over here really lets this hip feel like it drops down and under the brace, which allows you to stay behind the brace more. So that, I think that concept would be really good for you, because you tend to shift the shoulder weight too far forward, like we were talking about on that first video, right? And that is that shoulder shift and the kind of toppling towards your brace is consistent on all the videos that you send me. So that's just how you throw. and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's preventing you from bracing as efficiently as you could. So cleaning up the shoulder lean will help the most. And then if you want to harvest even more efficiency out of your brace, messing with getting this leg to go a little bit more right is going to be the secret ingredient, I think. And that, again, that allows the hip to hang down. So looking from the side, like if this is your plant, this is your locked out brace leg, this is your front hip socket, it's going to feel like and look like your rear hip socket is down here, and then the leg is doing that scoop thing behind you. So, when beginners throw, they don't brace very well, and their hips stay on the same level, and then their leg just gets jammed up under them. So getting the rear hip to hang down under the front hip really lets the weight of the rear leg stay in the brace foot and add more downforce to the brace foot, which lets your brace be stronger, stay on the ground longer, lets you keep your really nice hyser lean because the leg is counterweighting it, so you can keep that nice angle that you had, right? Hopefully that'll make sense. I am talking too much. I will keep going. What else? Yeah, so let's look at the toes on your side shots, your earlier side shots, and then we'll call it good. So look at these first couple. That is not a side shot. I was going to look at your brace in that one, but in the interest of time, I think we covered that already. So this one's a side shot, right? Yeah. So again, rear foot placement, your heel's creeping forward a little bit. And that, like, you have a lot of bend here in the knee. So more bend is going to make it harder. There's going to be more rotation necessary to get the knee into that bent in position that I want to see, remember? And then that was what I saw first, that I was like, okay, this guy's going to add a ton of distance if he can clean that up. So I haven't tried this yet, but let's do an experiment. Yep, that's pretty clear, right? So you're opening that foot a lot in the last foot. So a couple of things can be the problem there. This stride can be too long. I don't think this stride is too long. I think you're probably athletic enough to make this work, but you're in pyramid stance, right? So your legs are pretty darn straight, and that's not what we want. The way you get your hips to pivot quick and pivot on the spot, which is what we want. Remember, we want this hip to stop entirely, maybe even move backwards a little bit, and we want this hip to shoot around, and we want that all to happen behind the brace. So if this hip drifts up over the brace at all, we have failed the mission. You want everything, all the rotation to happen right here, right? And that's super, super present in all of Drew's throws. So I'm sure it's there on this one. Once his brace foot gets down, boom, there's no more motion in the hips until after his leg scoop, his hips start coming forward. So like I'll pause when his brace comes down, like right there, his hips aren't gonna move. They're just gonna pivot on the spot. Bam, and then he goes forward. If you look at a bunch of people's videos on the Facebook group, nobody does that. Then that's why they're not throwing more than 350, right? Or if they are, they're not doing it with any consistency because they're just arming the crap out of it. So you get a really good brace, but you get it like right here while your leg is on that angle. So if you can get it while your leg is on this angle back here and have all the rotation happen while you're still really behind that brace, you're going to see a huge distance increase and a huge consistency increase. So again, that's a function of all of this weight dumping onto the brace too hard and the brace can't handle it. So if you instead keep the weight here longer, reach out further, so it'll feel like you don't need as much momentum, and you do not want your shoulder weight to topple forward. You want your shoulders to stay balanced on top of your X step, and then as you're balanced, you're tipping just a little tiny bit. So and it's not even like, it won't even feel like tipping. It'll feel like you're going from here to your leg is going to tip, but your spine is going to stay perfectly upright, while your leg is reaching out here absolutely as far as it can. So your leg needs to get out ahead and in front and before your weight shift, so that you can shift weight into it smoothly. It's still quick, but you're not slamming into it, if that makes any sense. All right, so that's about all I had, but let's double check your reach back on this one, just to double up on that. So we'll find your reach back. So there's peak, probably, and your heel's not down. Yeah, super not down. So that's not a big timing issue, but at the level that you're at, like, I assume from looking at your throw, you're probably throwing pretty darn far. But cleaning up that timing will get you more power and consistency. All right, that's about all I got, dude. It's looking really good. Hopefully this makes sense and is useful and will be very beneficial to your throw. If you have any questions, please get in touch. Happy to spend more time with you. But it's looking really good. Thanks for getting me some clips.